Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Orgasmica, the podcast where we talk all about sensuality, sexuality, and healing. And today I have a very, very special guest, somebody that I admire deeply and that I discovered a long, long time ago. And it's an honor to have on the podcast. His name is Adam Roa. He's an artist, he's a poet, and he's a transformational coach. Welcome, Adam, to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Yes. Adam, I discover you like probably many people did through your poems and your spoken word. There was a specific one on how to like find your perfect partner or something like that that I remember. And it just so beautiful the way you put words together, but it's not just words. It just feels a healing. I feel like it's just like this healing thing when you speak and when you put words together, because words also mean so much to me because I'm a writer as well. And so I do believe that words in a certain space with a certain energy can be like extremely healing. And I know there's a video of you performing this, speaking this, and I can like feel the audience, right? The audience is even like, yes, like it just rings so true to so many people. And it's amazing to watch you play with those words and bring your artistry also in a space of healing. And then I started following you and on your social media, and there was a specific video that I remember really resonated with me because I was going through this journey myself of loving my body and getting back into my sexuality, which is a video. And I don't know if it's a long time ago, and I don't know if you remember you posting this, but it was a video of you talking about how you look at yourself naked in the mirror. And and like basically making love to yourself as you are looking yourself in the mirror. And to me, that was some of the things that I still do to today is looking myself naked in the mirror and seducing myself and what has that done to my relationship to my sexuality and my relationship to my body. You know, it's like such a beautiful thing to experience and co-create in that way with our own selves, with our own reflection in our mirror. And so thank you for putting those things in the world, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, I went further than that. I made a post about how I had finally done this practice of self-pleasure while looking at
Mhm.
myself in the mirror, and I lost thousands of followers, and I got
That is
attacked by so many people who were very unhappy that I'd posted that. At the time, I didn't have a big social media following, so a lot of my followers were people I knew from high school and things like that. And so
Mhm.
I got really attacked. And then I made a video talking about the process so people had more of an understanding, because for me, it was something that I had not wanted to do for a long time. And I was on a deep healing journey. And to finally do it and to have such a profound experience from it, I felt needed to be shared. So I just shared it openly. That's all I've ever done is really just lived my life, tried to live it at the edge of my comfort zone as much as possible and push myself and expand my consciousness and then share what I learn along the way. And sometimes it can offend people. So I'm glad that I get to hear that that was actually supportive for you
It
because
is.
I got a lot of heat for it.
And what was the like what was the criticism? And I don't think it's criticism, I think it's themselves, right? Like the uncomfortability of even just being sexual. And usually we think, and like a lot of this space, when it comes to sexuality, is geared to women, really. I mean, my podcast as well, like the majority of my listeners are women and my circles and everything that I do. But what do you think? And usually people think, oh, men are okay in that space. But obviously, when a man shares vulnerably and in a sense of what your experience was, you know, in this sense, what were people saying? What was, and the reason why I'm asking is because I think that says a lot of like their own relationship with their body, right? And their own relationship with their sexuality.
Yeah, I remember a few of them. Some of the main ones were saying that it was basically just incredibly narcissistic and how self-obsessed could I be to look at myself while I self-pleasure. And then another one was I remember a friend all the way back from high school who wrote me and she was so offended and said it's not appropriate to be posting things like that. And I said, I didn't even it was I wrote it. It was a written.
Right. It's not like you
post, and
were
it was a
doing
pretty
it on
long.
the video. Right,
Yeah,
right.
I wasn't showing anything, and the only word that I used in there was masturbate, and I said that's all. That's the word that I went in there, and she said, well, what about like there are kids on here? Would you want your kids to see? And I said, first of all, how old are the kids that are on here? Two, how uncomfortable are you with those kids knowing about something called masturbation? At what age is it okay to teach kids about something called masturbation? And if they're not at that age, let's just say it's 13, maybe
Mm-hmm.
like that's pretty late, I imagine, but like let's say it's 13. Should you have your less than 13-year-old kids on a platform where people can post all these
Right.
things? Maybe that's a deeper question. Definitely, I've never said my audience is kids, so don't have them follow me. Why would they even follow me? So there
Exactly.
was a lot of a logical sort of thought process to it, which underneath it ultimately was I triggered people's lack of comfortability with the subject. I
Mm-hmm.
triggered people into realizing that they didn't feel all comfortable or safe engaging in that kind of conversation. And because I wasn't a quote unquote public figure in a big way, I didn't have a big social media following. It was to them as if I was just one of their social circle that was posting it instead of a coach that was sharing this information. I don't know that they should be different, but I've reverse engineered obviously what a part of it is. And I think that at the end of the day, the most important thing is we need people that are willing to have the open conversations about things that other people get uncomfortable around. And if we are not able to have or even read a post
Mm-hmm.
without getting triggered, my hope is that people realize that the triggers are inside themselves.
Yeah.
If you're triggered by what someone else has posted, that is revealing something about what's going on inside you, and that's a gift. And
Yeah.
start there before projecting it outward. But most people don't know that or are not willing to face that and go into fight or flight. And the flight mechanism is to unfollow, which I had thousands of people do that. And then the fight mechanism is to attack.
Right, right, right. Yeah, you're right. And I think I've seen you do this a couple of times where you're speaking of the thing that might be like buried underneath something or unpopular or something. And I think that is part of it. I get a lot of shadow banning from Instagram just by speaking about the subject of sexuality, and a lot of my Instagram is in Spanish because I do feel like we need more content in Spanish that speaks about this because my culture is even more so varied in a lot of these taboos. And like my mom started following me and she started like coming, like this picture, Virginia. I'm like, that's not for you to follow. Like unfollow me there because I cannot be thinking of what can you think or what would your friends think because that come from a culture that is very much tribe based, right? It's like it's very like we all are in together. So whatever somebody does, it reflects upon every single person on the tribe. And so that's something that I had to fight in my own ways of speaking about this sexuality and the
Hmm.
subject. I wanted to
Yeah,
ask
it's
you.
definitely something that I applaud you for doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Likewise, because of people like you, I feel like I can't do this. um, I wanted to ask you, when did you start? I feel like everybody is creative. I believe that. I have that belief of creativity is of everybody. And some of us decide to live off of this creativity and kind of just plunge into the world of creativity in this way. When did you start using your creativity in this way? How, if I'm not mistaken, are you an actor as well, right?
I acted in Los Angeles for 10 years.
That's right. That's right. And so you were in this industry, in the entertainment industry, and this is a specific way of using creativity with acting with our body. And then I feel like a lot of actors like myself, I started writing and then using my words. When was your creativity? What is the relationship that you have with creativity, first off?
Ooh, that's a deep question. My relationship to creativity. I think that creativity is defined for me as the process of putting together patterns that you've never put together before.
Mhm.
That is what creativity is. As a poet, which I'm most known for, well, all I'm doing is putting together patterns of words in ways I've never put together before. And painters put together patterns of shapes and colors that they've never put together before. That's creativity. What's interesting is To me, that's also synonymous with how we expand our consciousness, because consciousness, really, my consciousness is the sum total of all of the patterns that I can recognize. And when we are able to put together a new pattern, such as, wow, I realize that I have shame around my sexuality because of this event that I had happen to me when I was 5. And when I put that pattern together, we say, whoa, I've just had this expansion of consciousness. But truly, what has happened is I've just put together a new pattern. And so, if our consciousness expands by putting together new patterns, and creativity is the process of putting together new patterns, then to me, creativity is the entire point of consciousness. It is how we expand, why we expand. It is the very reason why we are here. All the ancient texts say we were made in the image of Creator. We are a part of creation. We are here to create, and we create in every moment. So now that's a high level sort of esoteric woo woo maybe response to it, but I think it's important to start there because I think it is fundamental and essential to the very reason why our soul has come here. Then from there we can look at what is creative energy. Really, creative energy to me is life force energy. Our life force energy expresses itself in two ways. It'll express itself sexually, or it'll express itself creatively. Now, they're actually the same because sexually you're creating life through that, but it's often easier to differentiate the two for conversation's sake. But ultimately, if those are the two expressions of it, then it comes down to one single life force, the thing that beats our heart and breathes our lungs and causes the flowers to bloom. That force of life itself will express itself creatively. And so when we attune and invite in our creative energy, to me, that is to allow life force to actually flow through us in the way that it's designed, and everything will unlock through that process.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, I always am like, I think that my relationship with creativity changed when I started my journey with sexuality because I discovered it is one of the same energy. But at first, we're not taught creativity in that way, which is interesting to me, right? The way that you're saying it, I'm like, yes, it rings so true in my body. It had always, when I discovered this for myself, I was like, yes, why have I not been taught creativity is also part of it? What was your relationship to creativity before you came into this space, and how much has it evolved? And what was it that it evolved it into this?
That's a really good question because I grew up thinking I wasn't creative. So a lot of people see what I do now and they think I must have just been the most creative child. And no, by the time I entered high school, I didn't believe I was creative. I didn't believe I was very talented in the arts. And I assigned my value to academics and thought I'm going to be a successful businessman. That's what I'll need to do to get validation and approval and a super hot wife and all the things. And so I think that for me, when I found my way to creativity, I didn't find my way to creativity initially. I found my way to acting. So I had this really beautiful experience where I won high school, quote unquote. Basically, by the time I graduated high school, because I started really behind the eight ball, so to speak, I was late to puberty. All my friends were growing and getting hair under their arms, and I was not. I was super small, and I was not cool in that way. And I thought, well, okay, how do I play this game of high school? And by the time I graduated, I had been varsity in multiple sports. I was the president of clubs, was on an academic scholarship to college, and then I won Homecoming King. So this popularity contest of my high school. And I remember waking up the next morning and I looked over at the crown that they had given me and it was next to my bed. And I went, this didn't change anything. I still feel insecure. I still don't feel like the cool guy. I don't think that I've won anything really. And the big difference was I didn't have something I thought would change it. Because up until that point, I thought if I'm the cool kid in school, then I win.
Yeah.
And yet that didn't happen. And so that led me to start asking this question of if everything they've sold us is a lie? Because I won high school and I'm not happy. So what if I win life, right? I get rich and I have the house with the labradoodle and the wife and the 2.5
Yeah.
kids and the white picket fence, but I'm not happy. But I'll be 40 something. I can't do it. And so I thought, what was it that I can remember that made me happy? And I had acted in plays when I was a kid, when in my school, elementary, third, fourth, fifth grade.
Not
And
in high school.
I had really enjoyed it. Not in high school because I decided I'm not creative. I'm not talented. There's no reason to pursue that. And so I then said, let me just start taking acting classes again. And I was in college and I just started taking acting classes and I fell in love with it for a couple of reasons. But the primary one was it was the first place I felt safe to explore my emotions
Mhm.
because my father's from the Philippines. And so I had a very stoic, non-emotional Asian male role model, and it wasn't safe to express or explore emotion in my house. And yet I found this place where I could feel, which actually feels good, and I got rewarded for it. If you felt deeply, people said you were a great actor. And so
And
I
you're
went, oh, this
celebrating.
is interesting. And then they say our mess becomes our message. So I had been so shut down emotionally that to know that by going and doing this thing and feeling deeply, not only did I get to feel, but I could see myself making others feel,
Mhm.
that was huge. And it felt like an offering. And the more I convinced myself, well, then I could make movies about that could help change the way people perceive the world and enlighten people about what's going on in the world. And then I could use my platform of being famous to start a charity and do all these things. And I saw myself as an actor. I
Mhm.
didn't see myself as anything else. I didn't see
Create.
myself as creative at all, just
Right.
as an actor.
I'm an actor.
And
Right.
then I didn't get any opportunities really. I wasn't getting auditions. I was just waiting around. And at the time, I was in a relationship and she encouraged me to start writing. And we started making our own short films. And so I now was an actor and I was a writer. And then I became a director. And then I became an editor. But I never called myself an artist or a creative
Mhm.
that whole time. It wasn't actually until I started doing poetry. And once I started doing poetry, I said, wow, I play some instruments and then I can act and I can write and direct and I just do poetry. What am I? I'm an artist. I'm creative. And that permission slip changed everything for me. And it's something that I hope I land for people listening to this, which is just to think of yourself as creative opens your mind creatively.
Right.
And until we accept that we are creative, we close and narrow the perspective on what we could see and do and accomplish in our lives.
That is a beautiful thing. And don't we all wish that we can live in a world like that? And I feel like there was a moment in time that we might be dead, where we all were like encouraged to use our creativity because that was part of creativity was part of, people just sitting down and coming up with ideas and storytelling and how storytelling was at one point in the world one of the most important things a human can do, for the tribe, for all these things. What do you think that change? Like, why are we not encouraging people to be more creative on a daily basis? It feels like, the path of business, like you said, right? It's like business, and you have to like wake up and da da da. You're a businessman, and you wake up at 5, and you do cold plunging, and you eat like this, and da 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 da. And people in business, for example, don't think themselves as creatives, right? And when I met a business person who he think himself as creative because it allows him to create his business from a different space than everybody else is creating. And for him, it changed completely how he saw business, right? Because business can also be a creativity endeavor in a sense. Like it can open your creativity to for you to see and put patterns, like you were saying, in a different space and allow it for it to change and evolve and move and not be so rigid, because I feel like creativity is messy and goes up and down, and it allows you to turn this way and then to go on the other side and then go back into the same space, and it allows you to be messy and not structured, and in the process at least, right, of discovering it and creating. Why do you think that we don't apply this to most jobs, to most of the world, and that we're just having like, you're an artist if you are just ABC? EFG, and otherwise you are absolutely not.
Well, I think that most entrepreneurs probably see themselves as creative
Hmm.
because you have to get creative to solve problems for yourself and do things for yourself. But I think that the majority of people out there aren't entrepreneurs or wouldn't qualify themselves as being artists necessarily. So they're in what I would call more execution oriented jobs. And so someone who is creative must come up with a structure and a role and a vision and all these things. And then they come up with these tasks that need to be done to fulfill that vision. And
Hmm.
a lot of people, most people, work in jobs where they are there to accomplish certain tasks. Do this task and this task and this task and this task. And in many ways, that doesn't require creativity. It doesn't require you to see new patterns. But where that's so limiting is that your job or your work is not the only place that you exist. So
Hmm.
your creativity can look like the way that you prepare a meal for your family, right? Your creativity could look like the way you choose to dress yourself or the way that you organize your closet of clothes. There's so many ways that your creativity can express itself. And I think that it doesn't have to be only work, it doesn't only have to be at the job. But I do think if we nurture our creativity, we will start to bring more creativity to everything that we do. And if we are actively exploring creatively in our home life and we go to work, we're going to start to see the things that we do a little bit differently. I think that oftentimes that creative impulse is shut down because people don't know how they're going to monetize it or how it's going to lead to more money or how it's going to help them in their life. And to me, that's incredibly sad because creativity to me is why we're here, and your creative energy is the purest expression of your soul. It's
Hmm.
what makes you uniquely yours. If creative energy is life force energy, then the way that life force flows through you cannot flow through anyone else like that.
Right.
And so to allow it to move through you in the unique expression that is only yours is like creating your own special tone, your own special sound or frequency out into the world. And I think that's incredibly healing. I think that that single act of saying my creative expression, my life force is worthy of being expressed is a huge act of self-love. It's incredibly healing. It's a lot of fun. And it also helps us expand our consciousness, as I spoke to before.
Yeah.
And so that's one element of the question that you asked. And I think the second element is when it comes to sort of the importance of storytelling in our lives, well, we're confused by it because society has created two very contradictory statements in the way it goes about expressing. So, first, we are taking arts out of schools.
Hmm.
We are removing creativity as something that we are allowing our kids to do. And as a result, we're sending a message that it's not really important to the direction that we're headed as a society. It's something that you should do in your free time or for fun, but it's not essential. While on the other side of the equation, today's royalty, if you were to think about royalty in the world right now, are our celebrities.
Hmm.
That's that's who people look up to. Those are the people with the most influence, and you look at people and they are the actors and the musicians and even the athletes, and like these are our royalty these days. They are the celebrities, and so our society worships these people, puts them on a pedestal, and therefore sends a message that being a successful artist is one of the highest things that you can do. And so it's sending these two opposite messages. And I
Hmm.
think that that can become incredibly confusing and cause people to have really unhealthy relationships to creativity.
Right. Because some people think that creativity is equal fame. You know, like of course, I live in a life, so I understand that a lot of people not much care sometimes about the creativity. They just, you know, care more about the fame and the notoriety and being seen. And then that's what this influencers, you know, like kind of influencers being put in movies, you know, that they don't necessarily act, but they're like, oh, people are going to watch the movie, so we're just going to put the influencer here in this movie. You know, it's like, it's also confusing because they don't, you know, they don't necessarily want to use that they're doing something different, you know, it's a different thing. Artistry or like playing a role, as you know, being an actor, it's kind of like a different thing that, you know, creating content. You know, I'm not saying it's not equally creative, it's just different. It's a different type. And we have now also merged those two and into who gets the fame and notability and who doesn't and what does that mean and the followers and all the things. And one of the things that you mentioned is like that I think because specifically in the United States, people really see themselves as their job, right? Like their job becomes kind of their identity. So it's really hard for, like you were saying, yes, you can be creative in other places, but when people put their identity as their job, you know, it's not like something that I do, but it is like I'm an engineer or like I'm a doctor and like they become that and like that's part of their identity. It's not like I'm an artist. No, it's like I'm a this, but also I can create this other things in my life and like people a lot forget about that distinction, right? There is a thing that you do, and then there's also the life that you live. And of course, they mix and go in, but that doesn't mean that you have to be an engineer in the kitchen. You know, you don't have to be an engineer in the bedroom. You know, you can like have different experiences of life within your own life. But the fact that we say like am a thing that I actually do, and not necessarily a thing that I am, and like confuses a lot of people in living their existence and how they approach creativity in life and their life outside of their work place. And so that I think that is one of the things that because I move in between my culture, because my whole family is in Mexico and I go there every like month and a half. And so I move between cultures so much. I feel like I have two lives in a sense. And I can see like I go really deep into one culture and I'm like, wow, like this is the, you know, and I can see the differences sometimes. So that's why I speak about the differences in the United States specifically. Not that Mexico or Latino people have their shit together. I'm not saying that at all. But sometimes it's living in this like both worlds that I get to see more of the perspective of like, here people say I am as a job thing. And in Mexico, we
Hmm.
don't have that. In Spanish, it's like what you do, and you don't say that you are. And so
Mm.
even in the language, the way we relate to the things that we are doing in the world for money, it's very different as a culture.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I found that very interesting. So, when did you start playing with these two ideas, and how do you, which is sexuality and creativity, and how do you, on your work, on everything that you do, on the creation, how do you play with both of them? Do you do it consciously? Was there a point that you decided to play with these energies in sync together, or it just kind of came really naturally? And how do you go about it now?
No, I think that for the longest time, I had such a deep discomfort when it came to sexual energy and
Hmm.
sexuality. I went through sexual abuse when I was 5, and it was a repressed memory until I was 30. So for 25 years, I just had so much shutdown around my sexuality, and I didn't know why. I just thought that's how I was. And creativity became an outlet for that energy. Creativity became an outlet for me to flow my life force, my essence out into the world. And I think that once I started to heal around my sexuality from basically once I remembered that memory at age 30, I'm 40 now. So the last 10 years has been this journey of, well, how do I heal that? And first, I also need to understand how it's even impacting me. How is it affecting me? How have I been shut down? Wow. Okay, what do I do about that? And so this process of healing just merged with creativity in the way in which my healing process became a part of what I expressed.
Mm.
And so I think that one of the biggest aspects of creativity that I find valuable is that it creates a safe space for us to express whatever we want, however we want. There's When it comes to our creativity, there's no limits, there's no boundaries other than our own imagination. And so to me, that was the natural way that it first started to play together, was just giving my healing process an opportunity to express. And I think that that's really valuable because if right now 95% or more of our thoughts on a given day are thoughts we've had before. So this is all humans, which means that all of your stories about your past traumas and wounds and breakups and etc., you generally will repeat that same story to yourself over and over and over for the rest of your life unless something comes in and shakes it up.
Yeah.
Well, creativity is beautiful because if I take a poem and I point my mind at the sexual abuse I experienced when I was a child, I'm forcing my mind to see that event differently in order to create a pattern I've never created before.
Mm-hmm.
If I was going to then paint it,
Mm-hmm.
I would have to see it completely differently to be able to express it in that way. And if I was going to play it out instrumentally on a guitar, same thing. And so just doing that one process now loosens the hold of the one way that we previously saw that event. And so I have two different albums of my poetry on Spotify. One of them is called Permission. The other one's called The Journey Back to You. And The Journey Back to You is all relationship poetry, and a lot of it having to do with a breakup. And it's wild, but all of those poems, because they forced me to look at my breakups differently, because they forced me to look at my own pain differently, I think that they helped lessen the hold that each individual story had on my life and allowed me to move forward in a freer way.
Mm. I love that. Do you believe that sexual liberation and creator liberation are like intertwined?
Yeah, I think that to let someone see your creative expression is to let someone see the essence of your soul. It's the purest expression of you. That's why so many people are terrified of singing in front of people or dancing in front of people or writing a poem and sharing it with people, because there's something about this is my creative expression and it's so deeply vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so when you free yourself up to start expressing yourself creatively, you also develop a resilience that will translate to every other area of your life, including sexually, because sexually, outside of creatively,
Mm-hmm.
they are sexually is also the most vulnerable, intimate way that we allow others to see us. And I say that with a sort of asterisk next to it because there are a lot of people that are going around having lots of sex and aren't letting themselves really be seen. The same way that there are a lot of people that are creating art that's very surface level and not really letting themselves be seen. And so to me, that distinction of when you're really letting yourself be seen in either capacity, it will translate to other areas. If I'm comfortable allowing my sexuality to be witnessed, that will give me more courage to let my creativity be witnessed, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I feel that for me, I didn't make the connection for a long time, coming from a really religious background and all of that. Like, to me, it was like, okay, this is the thing that you do over here, and this is the thing that you do over here. And I felt this fully connection that it's electric, that it feels kind of like an orgasm when you're on a stage and you're fully being seen and you're sharing your heart. And it just feels like that's like the number one fear of people was it's public speaking, right? It's like standing up and like sharing yourself. And for me, it was a different thing playing a character and sharing myself with that and then just speaking as myself when I did spoken word was a whole other ballgame because I was like, oh wow, this is just me, right? I'm not like a character. I'm not portraying somebody's words. I'm not embodying somebody else, but it's just me sharing my full heart, which it was a whole other ballgame for me. People think that for actors that's easier, and it's actually really not. At least in my experience, not every actor can like do spoken word or be there and share their themselves, and speaking engagement or whatever. People will always pass me
Yeah.
the mic on like weddings and stuff like that. It's like, you are the actress, go. And I'm like, it's not the same thing. It's just not the same thing. It's very different being seen in that way as yourself. But when you do, and there is this aspect of connection with everybody else, and you're seeing and you're connecting not only with one person, but it feels like, to me, it feels like intimacy, right? It's like, oh, we're creating an intimate space with a bunch of people. And the energy, what I feel in my body, it feels very orgasmic to me. It feels like, oh, there's like sense of like, and then there's like the sharing, and then like the reaction of the people is kind of like a climax and a release. And like afterwards, you're like this relaxed but connected but excited, but like all the things that when you having connected, it's kind of the same. And so that's when I started to do like, oh, wow, it's the same energy. And for a long time, I actually pushed it away because I had, being a sexual woman in the industry became really dangerous for me just because I had different experiences of directors wanting to take advantage of that. And their excuse was like, well, look at you. You're a very sexual person. You're kind of asking for it. Right. And so for a long time, I shut that part of myself down. But when I did that, my life suffered greatly. Not only my creativity, not only my ability to create things that matter to me, it became very surface level, like you were saying. I was very scared to go back in that space of my sexuality and my body because it felt like going there was very dangerous. It was just not received well. And as a woman, and I'm sure men experience it in a different way, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. It just felt very unsafe and it felt threatening to many people. And so I had to do a lot of work on myself to be able to claim that back, to reclaiming my sexuality back, to reclaiming my body as mine, to become sovereign of my own pleasure and of my own creativity, and then being able to share that through my creativity, whether it's movies, whether it's scripts that I write, or whether it's a podcast or speaking engagements, whatever it is, to be able to bring my full self in that space. And I was wondering if you, as a man, but also as a man that has suffered obviously abuse, like you were sharing, is that any similar to you, or like getting back into yourself? What was that journey and like reclaiming your sexuality and maybe your creativity throughout that way?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for sharing your that experience. I'm sorry that was what you've gone through. I know so many people, and especially in the Hollywood machine, there is a lot of that, and it's unfortunate because ultimately it comes from um, that comes from weak men. Like the men that it's quite honestly just men who are threatened by sexuality from a woman and a woman in her empowered sexuality. And that weakness is again threatening. And so it triggers any kind of threat will trigger a fight, flight, fawn response. And so you will get people that want to just cast you out and say, I want nothing to do with you, or you'll get people who that fight response, that version of that would generally be trying to control it, right? Like take it. And I think that that's unfortunate. And I have been on my own, I guess, receiving end of that at the hands of a man when I was a child. And it created a huge sense of, I mean, the primary one is that I was not safe in my body. But other beliefs that formed were that sexual energy, especially from a man's sexual energy is uncontrollable and causes pain. And therefore, I shut my own down because I never wanted to cause pain to anyone else. And that led me to really struggle with, for example, I didn't feel comfortable being the object of sexual attention or sexual energy. So I was terrible at picking up a woman out when I was out. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't make eye contact. I was like, I just don't want to be seen as creepy or a predator or I don't. And so I didn't know how to be with women, to be honest with you. And that I was blessed to be in a relationship from age 23 to 33 for 10 years of my life with an incredible woman that held a lot of space for me in that process. But I didn't, for the first 6 years of that, I didn't even know that I was shut down, right? So we can't fix what we can't see. So it took me 6 years to even identify it. And then I had to retroactively look at all these elements of my life and how I showed up and what my fears were. And the process of putting myself back together and finding wholeness is still ongoing, at 10 years into this thing. And I feel I'm still finding ways, such as if I'm in a state of overwhelm, if I feel disconnected in any way, I shut my sexual energy down.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of guy friends where they open it up and they go and they want to go have sex and fill their cup in that way. Not saying good or bad, just they open up and they're like, okay, I want to feel validated. And for me, I just shut it down. And so things like that and finding ways to see it as even wrong or broken, but just go, okay, that is the result of a chain of events that I can see,
Mm-hmm.
and I desire to be more sexually open. I desire to be someone who feels more comfortable approaching a woman in like, I don't know, out when I'm out in the world. And so if that's true for me, then how do I work with the wounds that I have? How do I work with these ways of being that I have seen? And I've done all kinds of somatic sexual healing work. I've gone to tantra retreats. I've worked with daikinis and tantrikas. I've done so much sacred sexuality work over the last 10 years that has helped 100%. And I find that I'm more comfortable talking about it. I'm more comfortable exploring it. I've gone to, play parties and these different experiences that I never would have done back then. But I still have areas where I can see my quote unquote default because of how I was initially programmed and imprinted. I figure out what works for me. I figure out what are the things that I need to be able to be in the energy that I want to be more often than not. And I think that's for everyone because some people are more shut down. Some people, they open it up. Some people experience sexual abuse and then they say, I'm going to take power back by freely giving my sexuality away. And so there's not a right or wrong, but it's important for us to understand what causes the behaviors and decide who we really want to be and then figure out how we can support ourselves in getting there.
Yeah. What are some tools that you use till today? Like, do you have certain tools that you can share that for the audience that help you get connected with yourself when you get disconnected in that kind of way?
Dance. Dance is a great one. I love to dance. I feel powerful and sexy when I dance. And so pretty much it doesn't matter what mood I'm in, I'll always feel better if I dance a
Yeah.
bit. And especially when you have a dance partner that it really clicks, it's it's not as good as making love, but it's close. It's great
Yeah.
when you really hit that rhythm. And then uh, breath is a big one. I think that I was at the end of last year, I was in San Sebastian, Spain, and I was writing my book. It's coming out at the beginning of this coming year. It's my first book of poetry and journal entries. And that experience, I was isolated for 2 months. I didn't really see human beings for most of the time I was there, and there was no dating, there was no anything. And I just decided, okay, I still want to cultivate my sexual energy. And so I would just every day make sure to breathe my sexual energy up the different chakras through my root all the way around in the microcosmic orbit for people who are familiar with Tantra and Mantak Chia, or this microcosmic orbit, and just circulate my own sexual energy every single day because I knew that I wasn't going to be hooking up with anyone or having any of those things, so I needed to do it myself. And
And you were writing, right? You were saying that you were writing. So was
Yeah,
that
I was
also
writing.
helping you to put out that creativity? It's like when you write, do you feel like you need to be in that open space, or is another part of your energy goes into the writing?
I needed to find balance of my energy. So we all have yin yang, alpha omega, masculine feminine energy inside of us. And my book is a compilation of journal entries and poetry over the last decade plus of my life. And so I was reading all these journals, and it was very yin. It was very emotional. It was very I was sitting, I had an ocean view, and I would sit and just look out at the ocean and the trees, and no one was around. And it was very all very yin. And I realized that at a certain point of that process, I needed that yang. I needed that fire. I needed to feel masculine and powerful because I was going into this sort of rabbit hole of sad, mopey version of myself that I didn't want to be. And so that was the reason why I was circulating that energy to feel powerful and sexy and masculine in my body because I was going the other direction. And I often operate like that. I look at how do I heighten the types of energy in me and around me that serve the chapter of my life, because there's certain chapters of my life where I more yin every day would be very, very useful and valuable. And okay, I'm going to start to go to yin yoga, and I'm going to do longer, quiet meditations. And then there are other times where I need to do jujitsu and go out into the world and be social and more yang and put myself out there. And I think when we understand ourselves and our own sexual energy better, because our sexual energy is both of those energies combined, the kundalini. Well, I think that at that stage, when we have that understanding and relationship within ourselves, we can be in more conversation. We can say, I could bring more of this or more of this, and allow ourselves to work with our energy instead of just falling into unconscious patterns.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm just going to ask you one last question that I ask all my guests, which is, what to you is an orgasmic life?
Ooh, what to me is an orgasmic life? I think one in which I can wake up and be looking forward to my day every day. Be looking forward and excited that I get another day to live this life. That's an orgasmic life to me.
Hell yeah. I love that. Oh my God, Adam, thank you so, so much for gracing us with your amazing art and with your wisdom, and everything that you share in the world is so meaningful, and love having men that speak about this, that talk about this, that are vulnerable out there, that share their experience with the world. And you've done it so bravely. And so we all thank you so much for that. Where can people follow you? What are any offerings, how they can find you? Tell us all about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. These conversations are so important, and I love that you're hosting them. For people who want to go deeper with me, adamroa.com, ADAMROA.com, or Instagram, adam.roa. And I have a YouTube channel and podcast and all of those things. You can find me out there. My podcast is called The Creative Path. And lastly, I have, as just sort of a free offering, one of the things that I realize a lot of people get stuck with is they feel they want to shift something. They have that feeling. They know that it's like something's got to shift. I don't know what. I want to bring more of my creativity, my essence, but I don't know what it is. I designed a 60 to 90-minute process that I call Soul Scavenger Hunt. That's entirely free. If people go to adamroa.com, they can download it, and it takes them through a very simple process to identify what the clues are that their soul's been leaving them and help them identify the next steps that they can take to start living the life they want.
Oh, I love that. And I love the name Scavenger's Hunt. I love that. That's such
Yeah,
a good
Soul
name.
Scavenger Hunt. It's really it's a lot of fun.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so, so much again for being in this episode and being in this space. I'm sure all of the women are really, really grateful to also have a male perspective in all of this. So I'm very thankful to you. Keep spreading those amazing words. I'm excited to also have your book coming in next year.
Yeah,
So excited to read that as well. And then we'll plug in where they can find that as well. You probably have a newsletter as well, right? In there somewhere. So
I
people
do.
can.
I've just recently started sharing again, very personal stories and perspectives that I don't share anywhere else through email because I love to write. So
Yeah.
if they want to get on that newsletter, just head to my website.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. You know, the next episode next week is in Spanish. So I will see you in Spanish in the next episode. Have an amazing, amazing day.